Privacy is a hot topic, right? And if I ask you who invented the concept of privacy, do you know it was a woman? Do you know who it was? Adam is pointing to Eve when God said, "Why are you wearing clothes? Who told you you were naked?" So the concept of privacy is as old as mankind itself. Right? And many governments have tried to include it in their most basic documents, like the Constitution. But strangely enough, in the US Constitution, the concept of privacy is not there. And I researched on the internet, and I think I found the answer why. But seriously, it is in their amendments. No? Later on, these guys said, "Oh, we have to amend the Constitution." No? So the First Amendment protects the privacy of religious beliefs. Third Amendment protects privacy of the home. So the US eventually got it right. In the Philippines, we're lucky enough that we have our rights to privacy in the Constitution itself, in the Bill of Rights. Section 2, right to be secure. Section 3, privacy of communication. Section 5, privacy of religious belief. Section 6, privacy of your location. And Section 8, privacy, the right to access your own records through the Freedom of Information. We also have other legislation where these rights to privacy have been further enshrined. For example, your material wealth is protected by Republic Act 1405 and 6426. Your communications is protected by Republic Act 4200. The rights to physical privacy are protected by the Anti-Child Pornography Act and the Anti-Photo and Video Voyeurism Act. And finally, of course, we have the Republic Act 10173, the Data Privacy Act. Now, in talking about this topic, I decided to split the time between evenly between these four items. So the first item are the three axioms of the data-driven economy. And many of you already know this, so I'll go over it quickly just to catch up the people who still aren't aware and bring us all on the same page. Then I'll spend more time talking about the three different players who are talked about in the Data Privacy Act. You, the data subject, because when you're sitting here today, you're wearing one hat of being a Filipino citizen or an Irish citizen, right? And so you actually are a data subject as well. The second hat you wear is as a company. You know, whether you're here as a personal information controller or a processor, you have a second hat to wear. And then the third hat, the third player in this privacy ecosystem are the regulators, you know, the National Privacy Commission. So let me proceed first with, as I said, just to catch everyone up, the axioms of the data-driven economy. First axiom is that in today's economy, data is as good as currency. Agree? Disagree? Everyone's nodding their heads. So you can almost use it to pay for things, right? Like you can pay for your email by giving up your data privacy, right? You can put your photos in an online photo album and share them with your relatives around the world, and you don't have to pay a single cent. Just give them your photos. In fact, in another example, I was browsing the web earlier last week, and I saw this article, and it was interesting because it says, you know, there are 170 nations ranked in this report. I wanted to know what rank the Philippines is in. Would you like to know? Aren't you curious? So I went to their website, and they said, okay, we can give you the white paper, just give us your email. How many of you would do that? Okay. You're just shaking your head. Like, bayaran ko na lang kayo, kahit 50 pesos, but don't take my email. Okay? Because your data is valuable to you, it's valuable to the company running this website, it's also valuable to cyber criminals. And here's a recent example of kawawa naman tong guru na to, earning 16,000 pesos a month. And because he was so proud that he passed the PRC exam, he put his PRC ID on Facebook. And someone copied it, and now the bank is coming to him and removing 8,000 pesos from his salary every month and he never even signed any document. Okay, so it's really up to us to protect our own personal data. Because like I said, data is the oil of the 21st century. It's valuable to you. It's valuable to the companies that you work for. It's even valuable to society. Right? Coming here, I used an app called Waze. I gave Waze all my data, where I'm coming from, where I'm going, where there's traffic. And who benefits? Of course I benefit, but hundreds of thousands of users all over the world are benefiting from Waze. No? And society is actually reaping the benefit of that application. But like I said, society also has value to cyber criminals, and so therefore we should protect it. How do we protect the data? Well, primarily because data is collected by technology, then of course technology should also be the front line of our data protection. And therefore, I should only use technology that I trust. Correct? If you don't trust the technology, don't use it. For example, technologies like social media, okay, or cryptocurrencies, cloud computing, Internet of Things, even something like Pokemon Go, right, which uses augmented reality but collects a lot of data. How many of you actually are using Bitcoins, cryptocurrency? Anyone? Wala pa, because you don't trust it, right? Just like these two guys here, Carl and Ed. And the bottom line says, you know, I'm not sure about these technologies. It's getting creepy because the traffic light's actually saying, Carl, Ed, it's fine for you to cross, right? So the real question is, you know, do we trust these technologies that collect data from us? Do we trust these companies that collect data from us? And after what this guy said, do we trust governments that collect data from us? And just in case you're wondering what that whole Ashley Madison case was about, right? It's a website where you register if you want to have an affair. The database was breached, and we had three people committed suicide. One of them was a police captain, one of them was a pastor, okay? So obviously many people were shamed by this. And finally last week, the Privacy Commission of Canada, because it's a Canadian company, and Australia, because Australian citizens were impacted, finally got together and came up, you know, with their findings on this breach. But breaches happen every day, all around us, and they're getting bigger and bigger. And in fact, the Comelec leak is already listed on this website, right? Anthem is there, MySpace, and so on. So if you want to know about breaches, you know, you can go to that website, right? But the problem now is, how do we regain that trust? Basically, if a technology proves to me that it can protect my data, then I will trust it. If a corporation shows me that it can protect my data, then I will trust it. And if a government demonstrates to me that it has the political will to protect my data, then I will trust it. However, if that technology or company allows my privacy to be breached, then they will lose my trust. Which leads me to the third axiom in the data-driven economy. Privacy has become the proxy for trust. Because it's so hard to see trust, right? It's intangible. But privacy, you can validate and verify. And so if you breach my privacy, then you lose my trust. And if you lose my trust, then you lose my business. For example, let's say I sign up with a new credit card because they offer lower interest rates. But then the week after, the real estate subsidiary keeps calling me up and texting me for offers on their latest condominium. Or their loans division calls me up, offering me this pre-approved loan. I will therefore think twice about trusting that credit card company with my data. I will think twice about continuing my relationship with them. In short, trust has now become the killer app. Trust has become the competitive differentiator. In a world where product life cycles are becoming shorter, brand loyalty is cut because of copycat products, competition abounds, and your next competitor could be coming from Eastern Europe, South America, Southeast Asia, even Africa, and consumers' bargaining power is growing, trust can become the unique selling point and the competitive differentiator. Okay, so just wanted to catch everyone up on how important trust is. How much time do I have left? 20 minutes? Okay, thank you. So now we'll talk about the law. And when we talk about the law, as I said earlier, there's three players in the privacy ecosystem. You're all wearing a hat because you're also data subjects. The companies that you work for, whether they be called personal information controllers or personal information processors. And of course, finally, the regulator. Here, it's called the National Privacy Commission. If you are working in other countries or other jurisdictions, or you have companies that you're servicing from the Philippines, they would refer to this as the DPA, Data Privacy Authority or Data Protection Authority. Of course, there are illegitimate actors in this ecosystem. And again, it's good you heard the earlier talk because all of these illegal players, they're really out there and they want to misuse your data. And if you don't take care of your data, same thing that happened to the teacher earlier, he's suddenly getting harassed by collectors. No, but there have been other cases where they go and apply for a medical benefit, and then Medicare tells them, oh, sorry, you've already used up your allocation. No, and the worst thing about this is, wala ka nang ginawa, and yet you have to spend time and money to recover, to prove, right, that you weren't the one. So in order to become good data subjects, it's now quiz time. Okay. I'm going to ask you about your rights as a data subject. And these rights come from Republic Act 10173. Okay. So there are 8 rights. Let me just ask you, when you see a computer screen, it says, the U.S. government would like to use your current location. Which right are they respecting? The right to be informed, because they're informing you, right? That we want to use your current location. Problema lang nga, tingnan mo yung choices. Okay or okay? Okay, but you do have the right to be informed. If anyone's going to collect data from you, before they do it, they have to collect it. Now, think about this. What happens in a world with the Internet of Things, where there are sensor networks, hundreds of sensors around you, and you're walking through this conference room, you're walking through an airport, okay? And the airline wants to know, where is Dondi Mapa? Is he still far from the gate? Airplane takeoff, right? So what happens to consent in a world where we have millions of sensors out there? Is consent dead? Okay, there are now, Microsoft research has come up with some papers which say we should have content that's machine readable. So that what we do is we fill up already a consent form and we store it on our phone. And so everywhere we go, those sensors actually have to read that machine-readable consent form, which we carry around with us. So that's one possible move. But you do have a right, okay? Next. Or remember, we got thrown out of heaven because of Adam and Eve. Now, if you want to get back in, you have a right to what? What right is he asking about there? A right to correct any data about you, and a right to block or remove. And that's your right as a data subject. If there's something there, like for example, in Europe, there was this article about a person who had to file bankruptcy. No? And then he was able to get out of bankruptcy through years and years of hard work and become, again, financially viable. But when people would put in his name, the search engine would show not the actual page, because wala na yun, no? But the cached page. And so when someone clicks on that cached page, they would see, itong tao pala, bankrupt na pala yan dati. So he went to the European Data Privacy Authority and said, I have a right to have that removed, because I've already reestablished my financial credibility. Okay? What's happening here? Profiling. Sometimes because of all the data, or even just how you look or what they think they know about you, companies already give you an insurance premium or an interest rate. And you'll say, wait, how, you haven't even asked me to fill up any forms or anything, and yet you're already doing automatic processing on me. Okay? You have a right to object. Next. Who has heard of this guy? Who knows who this guy is? Hulk Hogan. His right to privacy was violated by a website called Gawker. And Gawker was sued in court, and they were asked to pay him $115 million. And as a result, if you've been following the news, they're almost close to declaring bankruptcy. In fact, they're just selling themselves out. That's the right to be indemnified. Bakit tumatawa ka dyan? May sex tape ka rin ba? What other rights do you have? Okay. Comelec breach. These guys, they came up to the National Privacy Commission and they complained about it. Okay? Don't take things sitting down. If you see that your privacy has been breached or someone else's privacy, magreklamo kayo. Wala pa namang filing fee. Baka mamaya, pag masyado na maraming complaints, but as of now, no filing fee, just file a complaint with the NPC. And last but not least, okay, the companies you have a right to access. Okay, you can go to Facebook, Google, whoever it is, SSS, and say, give me all the data that you have about me so that I can check it, if it's correct, and if necessary, I can move it to a different site because you also have a right to data portability. Okay? So those are your rights as a data subject. And I guess I'd like to ask you to wear this lens of privacy. We should start looking at everything we do through a lens of privacy, whether it's signing up for a security log when entering a building or providing sensitive information for a simple gym membership. In time, this behavior should be as simple as brushing your teeth, right? All of us do this every day. Yes, changing behavior will take time. It's really a culture change. But it's not impossible. For example, how many of you carry hand sanitizers with you? Or in your car? Or at home? Or when you go to hospitals, ginagamit yung ba yung hand sanitizers dun sa Yes, di ba, ginagamit natin yun. We were not taught to do that as children, but because of something that happened several years ago, the SARS, the epidemic, and so on, we changed our culture. And we decided that it would become important to use these things because an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so we have to do this also for our own personal data, right? Things like using strong passwords, updating our software, not falling for phishing attacks or scamming attacks. It's really a culture change, and we all have to be part of that. So let me shift now to the other player in this ecosystem, the companies. In my earlier example of the hand sanitizers, sino yun? Those are the hospitals. The hospitals have to spend millions of pesos to install those hand sanitizers. They have to spend millions of pesos to make sure those hand sanitizers are continually filled. Right? So they also share the burden. And so here we're saying that to protect the value that's there in the data, companies also have to share the burden. And we've classified companies into two types of companies: the controllers, those who decide what data is collected and how it's processed. And a controller is not a person, mind you. A controller is an organization. Like Comelec is a controller, SSS is a controller, Union Bank is a controller, and so on. Okay, we don't look for a specific person when we say controller. Just as when we say processor, right? Microsoft is a processor because you store your data with them, so on and so forth. And there are only three, so let me simplify this. There are only three legal obligations. There's an obligation around how you collect and process personal data, right? There's an obligation around once you have that personal data, how do you secure the data and control access to that data? And the third legal obligation is once there's a breach, how do you manage notification for that breach? But before I go into the legal side of it, I just want to show a quote from a former member of the Singaporean Parliament who says, "In a world where privacy concerns become more prominent and the demand for more stringent protections becomes standard, a data breach may be a business killer." Forget about that legal protection. Forget about someone putting you in jail. Baka bago umabot doon, magkarote na kayo. Because this is typically the sequence, right? Your data gets breached, then you try to recover, and at some point, damages are brought to you. Right? So companies, in many cases, for example, Target, right? Even before, they had to reach the point of going to court, they were already suffering the business consequences. So in a lot of cases, what I'm talking about here, cybersecurity, privacy, it just makes good business sense. Because how much does it cost? In a recent article, the estimate was $6 million or $158 per record. Look at Comelec. How many records were there? 55 million records, right? Hindi naman 55 times 158, no? But just look at a simple calculation. 300,000 passports were breached. 300,000 active passports. In order to renew those passports, magkano? 950 pesos. What's 300,000 times 950? 285 million pesos, or roughly $6 million. So the article makes sense, right? How many of you sitting here today have an extra $6 million in your bank account or your company's bank account? Okay. So it's important to build a privacy culture and embed privacy in your HR policies. Now make sure all your employees have a light bulb that goes on in their heads when they are faced with a situation where they are handling personal data. Just like it becomes second nature to you to brush your teeth and use hand sanitizers, it should become second nature for your employers also to work through this culture of privacy. A lot of you might be tempted to say, oh, we can't afford it. Okay, give us some time. Well, my answer to you is bank robbers don't discriminate, do they? Bank robbers don't say, oh, let's not rob that bank because it's a development bank helping farmers. Or that other bank is a rural bank which holds deposit of widows. In the same way, hackers don't discriminate. Whether you're a hospital helping the poor, a journalist writing an expose, a researcher working on the world's next problem, hackers will go to the easiest defense to penetrate and take all that data. Case in point, newsrooms. Right? The Russian hackers, they said, wow, it's hard to penetrate this, it's hard to penetrate there. And yet they have newsrooms where they're collecting data. And of course, they'll publish some of that eventually. But all the raw data was so easy to hack. And so that's where they attacked. So please act now. Okay? Act now, protect your data, or repent later. Right? And why will you repent? Like I said, because there are 3 legal obligations. The first legal obligation is collect data according to transparency, legitimate purpose, and proportionality. Don't be like these guys in the cartoon. Okay? They're just collecting data for data's sake. Okay? You have to collect data for a specific and legitimate purpose. You have to process it fairly and not in order to profile your data subjects. You have to ensure data quality and therefore allow them to correct it or destroy it if it's inaccurate or incomplete. You should retain it only as long as necessary. Although some laws say you have to keep it longer, like for bank records and health records, right? And if you have any further processing, like you're going to do big data analysis, make sure that you apply safeguards, like anonymization, pseudonymization, or differential privacy. Now take note, right? These obligations are almost a match to the rights of the data subject. Right? Like I said, both of you, the data subject and the corporation have to work hand in hand. Second legal obligation is to secure that data and anyone having access to that data so that you meet confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Right? Keep it confidential, no unauthorized access. Make sure that you have integrity, meaning you correct anything if it's wrong. And availability, no? Meaning you have backups. You have disaster recovery, business continuity, and maybe even store it outside the country so that in case your data center, your local data center is destroyed, you still have that available data. And as we say here, there's 3 levels of technical measures, of security measures: organizational, your HR, hiring, your training policies, your physical, as well as your technical, your tripwires, your firewalls, and so on. And the third and final legal obligation is breach management. Again, the earlier talk told you already about some ways that your databases could be breached. Your legal obligation is to make sure that your employees can identify it. Baka may nangyayari na, hindi pa nila alam. So you have to teach them how to identify and classify a data breach. Then you have to contain and recover. Once it happens, then you should be able to say, okay, what next steps do we do para hindi na lumaki to, para hindi na lumala? Then you do your risk assessment. Who is this impacting? Malala ba ito? Gaano karami ang natamaan? And then you notify us. There's a legal obligation that within 72 hours, you have to notify the National Privacy Commission. And we can then advise you, kailangan ba i-notify yung mga data subjects? Or kung meron pang ongoing forensic investigation, posible na sasabihin namin, wag muna. Baka may magpanic. Baka yung perpetrator, pwede pa natin ulihin. Okay? So, please inform us and we can help you to sort through the obligations of notifying your data subjects. And finally, evaluation and response. Oh, ito, ang daming natamaan. So what should we do? How should we respond? And one example is COMELEC. We sat down with COMELEC and we said, ang daming natamaan. I think you guys have to put up a hotline. And just 3 days ago, COMELEC announced, yes, they are going to put up this hotline. And you can call them up just to see if someone's going to answer. Okay. No, but please, no prank calls. No, please, if you have a valid complaint, and what can those complaints be? You know what was breached dun sa COMELEC data hack? Birthdays of the voters. Birthday sensitive personal information. Bakit? Meron na tayong batas na you cannot discriminate on age. So if you go and apply, I'm not saying that you should apply to a different company. Please stay where you are now. Okay? Pero baka sakali kung mag-apply kayo sa ibang kumpanya, hindi nyo kailangan ibigay yung edad nyo. Kasi meron ng law against age discrimination in hiring. Eh biglang pag sinabi ng HR nila, ito na pala yung edad mo. And saan nila nakuha yun? Assuming it's not in your Facebook page, right? If it came from maybe your COMELEC voters record, then you can call the hotline and say, hey, I want to file a case. Can you provide me a lawyer? COMELEC has to do that. Where to start? Okay, I mean, you've already have a lot of speakers that are going to be talking to you about this today. Let me go quickly through these slides. First of all, you must appoint a compliance officer or officers. No? Why do we say at least two? Someone to look internally because your own employee records are personal data. Someone to look externally at your customers and your clients. And that compliance officer can work with HR for organizational policies, security for physical security, IT for technical, and of course, legal. It doesn't mean that you as the compliance officer are accountable for this. You work together with a team. Some other places to start doing a privacy impact assessment. Now, one of Microsoft's partners called Appoint is actually allowing you to download a tool for free to conduct your privacy impact assessment. So I recommend you take a look at their website. The end of the privacy impact assessment is just to give you a feel of what are the risks involved. Is it low risk, high risk, maximum risk, unacceptable risk? And based upon the risk, we expect you to put a certain level of control. Right? Low risk, light touch. High risk, high touch. Unacceptable risk, don't do that data collection or processing. Another topic that where you can start is to get a certification as a certified information privacy technologist or certified information privacy manager. And you read as much as you can. This one I found to be the best book so far. It covers the Philippines, Singapore, Malaysia, and it talks about 88 real-life stories. And in each of these real-life stories, what were the lessons learned? So again, a very valuable resource. Bottom line is, whether you're a bank, a hospital, an airline, or a retailer, customers will ask you, if you can't keep me safe on the internet, how can you keep me or my family safe in the real world? How can I trust you? How can I trust your products or services? Okay, last few slides. As I said, I just want to talk a little bit about the third player in this ecosystem, the National Privacy Commission. Hopefully, you're never facing us for a complaint. But if there's a complaint in front of us, these are the things that I'll ask you. Sino ba yung compliance officer nyo? Sino ba yung CIO? Wala kayong in-appoint? Bakit? In-appoint nyo yung janitor nyo? Bakit yung janitor? Hindi nyo ba alam na sensitive yung information nyo? And the sensitivity will come from the privacy impact assessment. Please show me your privacy impact assessment. Okay, ginawa nyo ba? Did you know what the risks are? And if you knew what the risks are, then what policies did you put in place? So seriously, I'll ask you to submit that so that we can assess if there was any negligence, if there was any criminal act. The things that we do, the functions, the major function is rule-making. So for example, we're coming up with the IRR for the Data Privacy Act. That's a 40-page document, which is the major rule on how to implement this. I'm also coming up with a 10-page issuance to heads of government agencies. Basically, I'm going to tell these government agencies where they can store their data, how to keep it safe. Because as NPC, we're in charge of government. But later on, we're going to come up with rules for banks. And we will ask the Banco Central to help us with that. We will come up with rules for hospitals. And we'll ask DOH to help us with that. We'll come up with rules for telcos. And we'll ask the NTC to help us with that. So rule-making. And what's important with rule-making is we check for compliance and monitoring. We check that you're doing what the rules actually say, and we advise you on what to do if you're not meeting those rules. And by the way, the advisory includes international advisory. If you're doing business in Malaysia, in Japan, and then you need some advice as a Filipino company on how to comply, we can also give you advice on that. Next, of course, we do education and advocacy, giving talks like this and having CIO summits. So within the year, we'll be announcing a data privacy summit, to which we'll invite CIOs and compliance officers. So again, please watch out for that on our website, privacy.gov.ph. And of course, we entertain complaints and investigate. So for the COMELEC complaint, we received it. We then started conducting hearings. We asked COMELEC to submit certain documents. And based upon their findings, we're about to release our final report, which will include some enforcement actions. Things like, kailangan magpa-audit kayo taon-taon. Kailangan, i-notify nyo yung mga data subjects, so on and so forth. Right? Some of our enforcements will include jail time, as well as fines. And as I said at the top of the screen, we can actually forward that to DOJ to file the actual case, or kayo mismo, yung data subject. Hindi nyo kailangan hintayin kami. Or let's say, hindi kayong masaya. Sasabihin nyo, NPC, bakit hindi nyo pinakulong yung mga to? Well, we might say, based on our findings, it doesn't justify the filing. But if you still want to file, you can go ahead. That's your right as a data subject. Okay. Here's the recent article, for example, about COMELEC. There are some findings of negligence, and as the article says, the commissioners are finalizing the report on what to do about that. In closing, please remember that whether you're sitting here now as a data subject or as a personal information processor or controller, Section 38 says this: any doubt in the interpretation of this act shall be interpreted in a manner mindful of the rights and interests of the individual about whom personal data has been collected. In other words, kayo yung pinaka-importante, yung data subject, hindi yung kumpanya. The golden rule, keep this in mind, treat other data subjects as you would want to be treated, right? We really know that there's a balancing act between collecting data and the advancement of knowledge, but we don't want to sacrifice personal data. And therefore, the Data Privacy Act upholds the right of information privacy of individuals. So please protect your data, because if you don't, you'll regret it. And I'll make sure that you're going to regret it. Okay? Thank you.